This is St Andrews Methodist Church in Filton in Bristol. My name's Tim Smart, and inside I'm going to meet some very special people.
Hello, I'm Dr. Pauline Emmett. I'm a member of this church and I was in charge of the refurbishment project.
Refurbishment?
Yes, so the church is now 60 years old. It was built at a time when this area was expanding.
So a lot of people were moving into the area?
Yes, that's right. It was the aircraft industry, which is developing very much in this area at the time, and we needed a new church.
How was it funded?
In fact, the funding for this church was a result of the bombing of the centre of Bristol during the Second World War. The old King Street Methodist Church was bombed and needed demolishing. And because of that, the compensation was they decided to build the church out here in Filton because this is where the new population was living.
Oh, so that funding was vitally important for this church?
Yes, absolutely. Was what paid for all of it. The funding that we had, so it had underfloor heating, beautiful wood and lovely wooden furniture. The church was opened in 1958 with a big ceremony. When my husband and I first came, which was 1972, there was a huge congregation every service, about 250 people. So it was very well used at that time, and we brought up our children here, and we used to run a pantomime every year as well.
But now, time has moved on, and so refurbishment was necessary.
Well, in 2016, the heating wasn't working. We had to be completely rewired for safety reasons. We were only using the church for a couple of hours a week because it was only suitable for Sunday services, with the huge pews that were here. And the congregation got together and decided we wanted to bring it into the 21st century.
So at that point you decided it needed refurbishing?
That's right.
So how did you go about that?
Well, we involved an architect. Come and have a look at these plans over here.
Yeah.
So you can see from this that this is the size of the church as was, and the church is the same size still. But you can also see that there are pillars. So when we were replanning the church, we had to keep within those pillars because they're structural, or the ceiling would fall down, roof would fall down. So one of the things we wanted to do was make an area at the front, this bit, that we could use for all sorts of different activities, not just church services. So we got rid of the pews for a start, and then we built a wall across to make this area at the back useful for other things, like storage area and a kitchen and coffee bar. And then the middle bit for a gathering area where we could have meetings or just talk to each other. But it was all within the original size of the church.
Where did you get the money from?
Firstly, by selling part of the building, which was underused, to Network Counselling. That's a Christian organisation which helps people who need talking therapies. They took over their part of the building in 2018 and were able to build new counselling rooms on an open part of the land and convert the rest of the building to teaching rooms and offices. They're very happy with their new home.
And did you raise some of the money yourselves?
Yes, we had quizzes and coffee mornings and gift days, and we even had a sponsored cycle ride. And also we had lots of junk that was left in the church and we had to get rid of. So we had sales and gave some to charity, and we also had to, I'm afraid, dump some of it.
So how did you raise the rest of the money?
Well, we started writing grant applications, lots of them. There are charities that fund this sort of work, so including the Methodist Church, and they were very good and did give us quite a bit of the funds.
Uh-huh.
We were recommended to apply to the Inefficient Community Trust, which distributes the Landfill Communities Fund. They gave us £25,000 towards the accessible facilities. So we'd already been talking to George, the architect, for quite a while, and he had got 3 tenders from builders, but we hadn't actually decided which builder to have when lockdown happened in March 2020. So luckily we were able to talk online and on the telephone, and we did actually make the decision gradually. And so when lockdown became released a bit, we decided that we would meet up, and we eventually got the contract signed in February 2021. So now I'd like to introduce you to our architect. Tim, this is George Perris.
Good morning.
Hello, George. How did the refurbishment of this church compared with others that you've done?
Very similar, actually, in that there's always unexpected challenges to get over as you work through the construction process.
So how did you go about reducing the cost to match the budget?
We had 3 areas we needed to reduce the costs on. So we worked with Pauline, Simon, the minister, and our contractor KP Wilton to reduce the costs of those areas, one of which was the toilets. We went from a dual-sex toilet to unisex, which gave us more space, less cubicles, worked much better. The other area was the choir. We retained the choir as is, rather than removing it, which was extensive work. We also didn't install a lift, which was planned for that area. And mainly the third area, which we did a lot of work with the contractor on, was we removed the proposed ceiling to the ancillary rooms. In hindsight, everyone agrees it's a much better solution in that there's a great deal more light in that area. And those 3 areas all provided us with the cost cutting that we required.
So I understand that this is the original floor.
Yes, very much so, and a fantastic parquet floor it is. The retention of the floor was a conversation I had with Pauline, Simon, and the various other church bodies from very day one, whether we could retain it or not. Ultimately, buildings like this were built at the time with a lot of asbestos. We knew there was asbestos here. However, we came across a lot more asbestos than we ever thought we would. And that was part of a conversation that ultimately resulted in us retaining this floor, much to everyone's delight. Now, part of that meant, where do we put the electrics? That resulted in us reutilising a catwalk in the original ceiling to reroute all the electrics through. So part of the original construction has been utilised by this refurbishment, which is quite a nice feature to say, well, yes, we've reused part of the original.
So I understand that you used the cherry picker to reach up into the ceiling, and that also formed part of the way that you reduced the cost to hit the budget, instead of using scaffolding.
Yes, that was very much a conversation, in that taking down the original ceiling was a huge effort, as you can imagine, to a space of this size. The original conversation was we need to fill the entire space with scaffold. The significant cost that has was a discussion again where how do we remove that cost? And the answer was, whilst it will take you longer and there's a delay to the project in its timescale, we can do that with a cherry picker and mobile scaffold, and that's what we utilised to essentially build the new ceiling and put in all the acoustic tiles that are up there. And above those acoustic tiles, there's a significant amount of insulation, which again was part of the original brief we had from the church, in that they needed to reduce their energy costs of this space. So yeah, there's a lot of insulation up there.
So how did you protect the floor when you're running a cherry picker all over it?
That's a very good question. Yes, you couldn't run a cherry picker around on here. We ended up with multiple sheets of plywood and other protective materials over the areas where they were working, and it was actually quite comedy in a way to watch them move that cherry picker, because it's a bit like a game of Tetris where they were moving sheets of ply to then wheel this machine around on. So yes, and that's why it was then protected. So one of the key features of the scheme was the large wall that separates 2 spaces from the main worship space to the ancillary area at the front of the church. The timber and glass glazed screen that we installed to the base of this provides both visual and clear separation to the two areas, allowing for that easy separation and also inclusion of the both areas together. The removal of the proposed ceiling spaces allows the light from the large original feature windows to add to this space. This space in itself is very much designed to allow for people to mingle as they come in and out of either a function or church services, and provides for quite a fabulous interval space. So as part of the subdivision of the ancillary area, this was the kitchen coffee area that we created. We retained the rather fantastic original aluminium glazing, which full height gives the most amazing amount of light in the space.
So this all looks really nice and open and practical. Has it always been like that?
No, the stage has been significantly extended. It's probably doubled in size actually. As part of that works, we've also installed the ramp to the side to give easy access to all users of the stage on and off. The additional space, as you can see, far more suits the furniture that is installed.
Well, thank you very much indeed, George.
Thank you.
It's been great to meet you, and thank you for your help.
Thank you, pleasure.
Ah, Pauline, I gather there was some really beautiful wood in the original church.
Yes, well, you've already had a look with George at the parquet floor, which is very lovely, isn't it? But we also had this font, this lectern, the communion table and the cross, and all of those were made at the time the church was built by the aircraft apprentices, and it's been here, and we've kept this part of the church looking very much the same as it always did. But we do have a new lectern as well, and this was made from one of the old pews and is made to match the old lectern exactly.
And I gather that new cross hanging over the entrance was also made from one of the old pews.
Yes, it was made by one of our friends, and it's looking very lovely.
Yes.
Back there.
Mike Goldsworthy.
Yeah.
Nice. And now you have this swanky new audio-visual system.
Yes, we needed to have a new system to communicate with our congregation and for people to use, including microphones, and it also can be worked from a computer at the back.
And that is in complete contrast to that organ.
Yes, the organ was built in the church in the beginning, but it was an older organ that was installed in the church, and it's a full pipe organ and plays very nicely. Finally, I'd like to introduce you to our minister, Tim. This is the Reverend Simon Edwards.
Hello, Simon. So how do you think it's gone?
We're delighted. We're delighted in what we have compared to what we used to have. It's much lighter and brighter and a much more usable space. And it means that we can open up our premises for all kinds of community uses. So we're really pleased. We're grateful to all of our volunteers who've taken part, who've shared and have given their effort and worked hard. We're grateful for George, our architect, and for our builders. And of course, what we have now is wonderful, and being able to open it up for lots of people is wonderful.
unacceptable. It's unsafe.
No, it isn't. It's the work of a genius.
Oh.
Me.
Camera's running.
Camera rolling.
Camera rolling.
Dave rolling.
Rolling.
We're all rolling.
Rolling.
And action.
With me now is heritage campaigner Henrietta Barlow, an environmentalist. Jane Meadows. Everyone will see it that simply built.
But we need more houses, more housing estates.
Let's move on.
But think about the homeless.
Okay.
By your Spirit, to serve you with joyful peace, to the glory of your name. Amen. And remain faithful as we journey the pilgrimage of life with you. Bless us, Lord. Amen. Renew the life of the Church. Strengthen our witness and make us one in Christ. Prayer for thy kingdom come.